United are confident, I think, that they can get this one done. Cunha wants to come to Manchester United. It's a big step forward. I think overnight there was a big step forward taken, at least from his side, if not from the Wolves sort of side.
Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe, and today we are joined by a special guest, Manchester United correspondent for the Daily Mail, Nathan Salt, back in the building. How you doing, Nathan?
Yeah, first time I've been back with you since January, when it was all about Matheus Cunha and like, is this the end of the season? So I'm glad to be back, Joe.
Yeah, I'm very glad to have you back. Obviously, you've been on the channel with Jay and separately. There's been some big news though in the last sort of day, and a lot of it is coming from obviously your publication, the Daily Mail. I think it was Simon Jones who initially broke this news of. It's basically United have taken a step forward in terms of signing and the approach from Matheus Cunha from Wolves. Yep. We're going to get into all of that. There's loads to talk about there. There's also other players. There's been updates on Delap since we last spoke. Victor Osimhen, the general sort of situation around him. I also want to talk a little bit about the involvement of the youngsters at the weekend. Amass and Fredricson both impressing massively, arguably United's best players in that game. Loads to talk about. But let's start with this big main story then. And we saw last night your colleague Simon Jones, and of course I'm sure you've heard and you've been a part of all of these sorts of stories in the past as well. Talk to us about how this sort of latest update came to be.
Yeah, so I think United are very much aware that they do not have a free run at Matheus Cunha, as you wouldn't for any top player. And the way I look at the summer, we came on in January, I think United have had a running start at this summer. Vivel, Wilcox, Amarin, they speak daily about what is the plan. Amarin said the weekend, we know the plan for the weekend. He was asked about, what are you going to do? Did you keep playing Højlund, etc., etc.? He said, we know the plan of what we want to do. And some of that will depend on winning the Europa League, getting into the Champions League. I understand that. I don't think a move for Matheus Cunha does depend on winning the Champions League, winning the Europa League. I think that is a move you can do that he wants to happen. He is keen. You saw his dad and family members, they were posing for photos outside Old Trafford, all very smiley and happy. You saw him, I did. I was in there so early that I saw him walk out with his teammates just to get a look at the place, and he was sort of stood on his own, just looking around. And I love that there'll be people that say, man walks out onto pitch, looks at stadium, hasn't got his eyes closed or whatever, and that is a normal thing. But you could sort of see that it meant something to him, I felt, just from my interpretation. And I think he is keen. You saw it in Simon's report that then was picked up by other places, that United are keen. And the way clubs can work is you can agree contracts and things before you can agree the personal terms. It isn't a one-shot stop of, they know how much the release clause is, that's 62.5. They know that's the price. You want to get your contract ironed out. Is he going to be happy with the personal terms? United see him as a player in his prime, entering his prime, if you will, that can be plugged straight in to that left 10 role. They struggle for goals. He has shown he can score at a good clip in the Premier League. So I think from United, it's make a move early, change the atmosphere a bit, because you said on the channel the other day, you don't want to just accept losing all the time, and who knows what happens at Bournemouth at the weekend. A transfer like Matheus Cunha, if United can get that done early, can completely sort of alter the mood, I think, in the fan base.
So some of the phrases you're talking about here are using here are getting me quite excited. So obviously we're only
relax, Joe. It's okay.
Yeah,
still early.
But the way you're talking about this is though it's got a decent likelihood of getting done. Is that how it's seen at the moment?
I think so. I think so. You are picking up what I'm putting down there, Joe.
Yes.
So I think he's not done, is it? And like transfers, that anyone that you get on a lorry or any of the others, they know that things change quick. But I think Matheus Cunha has been someone that the Mail, alongside Chris Wheeler, we wrote about in January in our confidential column about how Cunha was one of the sort of priority targets that they've been scouting regularly. And I would stress that scouting a player goes beyond, they watch every team and every player before matches, obviously, but specifically scouting a player is important. Specifically scouted Delap, we'll talk about shortly, but Cunha is a player that they think can just be plugged in and to play. And I think the frustration among fans or in the comment sections or on social media is they're worried about not having ready-made pieces, because United need to improve immediately going into next season. You can't just have a load of learners or learner driver, I've seen the phrase going around, that Matheus Cunha is definitely not that. He's at a high price point. Antoine Semenyo is another one that they really like at Bournemouth. He's at a very high price point, but I think with Cunha, you're getting almost a bit of a hybrid, a 10 that almost could play as a 9 really, but they don't see him as that scores a lot of goals, and as we know, United don't score many goals, so he would be, I think, perfect for what they're after.
Yeah, so as it stands currently, because I know obviously we all just accept like United have made advancements in personal terms. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but that seemed to be, the general understanding of or the general overview of the article is there has been recent contact that has led to an advancement in this deal. How is that allowed? Like how? Because people always talk about tapping up, and then but yet we constantly hear like, oh, personal terms won't be an issue, which can't just happen by accident or telepathically, and yet. So I'm on, and then you kind of go, all right, well, fair enough. Clubs obviously do approach players one way or another. That's sort of accepted. And yet, every so often, every few years, you'll see a club like will have to defend a court case about tapping up. Right. It's like, one hand it's accepted, on the other hand it's illegal. I think
there's two. Ruben Amorim's not on the phone or not on the WhatsApp to Matheus Cunha at night saying how much do you fancy, how much do you want. But a lot of these players, top players, share the same agencies, share intermediaries that are. And you might be having a meeting about one player that you actually own, and maybe you drop in about Matheus Cunha would be nice, or Liam Delap, or there are ways around it. But you're right, it's a murky old one where I think if clubs really want to get down and dirty about it, they can maybe go down the legal route. But I think there's an acceptance at Wolves that this is only going to go one way. He will be leaving in the summer. We've had the whole Instagram furore recently, and then an apology to the fans, and I think Wolves fans know where this is heading, and for Man United fans, I think they hope, or based on what we're reporting at the minute and what others are, that Man United are definitely trying to accelerate to get ahead of everyone else, because in the past I think the criticism has been that United has dithered in the transfer market. Maybe they've waited till late August, and Amorim knows the importance of this summer, not just in personnel, but you need to drill your philosophy, whatever it is. I know he's had months and months, and people are going to point to defeats and has he improved these players? You're not necessarily going to get that much grace going into next season after a full pre-season, and so why would you not want to get Cunha and a striker and these other players plugged in time for that US trip? So important, the timing, and I think all these meetings leading up to it, Vivell, Wilcox, Barada and Wilcox there at the weekend. I've seen Vivell at so many of these youth team games. They know the pieces they want, and they just need to move for them now, I think. Yeah,
and it seems as though obviously they are doing that, and I think in January, you mentioned it at the start about Mathys Tel, and I think that his move to Tottenham, I haven't watched every game of theirs, but it hasn't been a sort of raging success by any means, has it? He's done all right. Just fine, maybe not worth it. Was it the 10 million fee roughly that put United off, that Tottenham were up for? Hasn't helped them in the league. They've gone down in league position, Tottenham. Although could win them a Europa League, who knows? But it seemed that in January that United were quite, I don't want to say reserved, but what would be the right word?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, sort of.
They know who they want, Joe.
Yeah.
I think we've. I mentioned in January, they know exactly who they want, and I think there's so many that. Well, the joke I always like is that Man United get linked to about 500 players every single transfer window, but internally, and you have seen it in all the messaging that comes out. They really like Liam Delap. They really like Victor Osimhen. They really like Matheus Cunha. They really like Tyler Dibling. So there are a couple of others in there in different positions that they like, and I don't really think we've wavered much from that. I think you've seen the same names for months now, and United just need to raise the funds. You need to sell Marcus Rashford. You need to sell Jadon Sancho. You need to sell Anthony. What do you do with Rasmus Højlund? What do you do with Casemiro, Andre Onana? There are others. Eriksen will move on. There'll be that wage freed up. There are a lot of moving parts, but I actually think the targets have been pretty consistent for a good few. We're in late April now, and back in January we were giving you the same names, and from all the conversations I've had, there's no sort of. I mean, you always could get maybe that sleeper that comes through, and out of nowhere United have signed this player, this great player. But really, I think they've been doing their due diligence, working out personal terms, working out how much is this going to cost, what do we need to move, and they're the players we want. So if it is a Cunha and Delap, or Cunha and an Osimhen, and a Dibling, and then they shouldn't be a surprise. United have been working very, very hard to see if they can get those deals in place.
It's good to hear that, and they feel as though they're targets that are possible. Like in the past, we've been so stuck on players that, you know, if you even just look for a couple of minutes, you'd realise that Frenkie de Jong didn't want to come, and that deal probably was never going to happen. I know it was years and years ago, but I remember when we linked to Sergio Ramos, and it was clear he was trying to get another contract at Real Madrid, but it was, you know, we're sending people out there, and no, we think this can happen, and obviously it didn't happen. And then occasionally we'll do one where you go, no, we're not going to get Varane. Like, we have. So I know it can go both ways, and you have to sort of push these things, and we've signed, I would say United have probably signed more big name players in the last 10 years than maybe any club in the world. You know, look at the sort of ready-made big names: Lukaku, Pogba, Varane, Ronaldo, Sancho. Like, not many clubs have done that. But at the same time, how many of those transfers worked? Certainly, I'd take Lukaku's goal scoring right now, but it didn't work in the way that we wanted it to. Maybe these sorts of players, of the Cunhas and Delaps, and slightly sort of, they've got a bit of experience, but they're not 300, 400, 500 grand a week kind of players.
Yeah, that's important, that they're not that 300 grand, that maybe 280, 300, 320 type bracket. I know there's been a lot made. I know when Chris came on, and I was frantically going through the comment section of the Paddock, which is my favourite place to be, as always.
It's
always my favourite place. And a lot of people saying, you know, Delap is not Premier League proven, and look at Lukaku. He'd proven himself really with Everton and West Brom. Nothing is a guarantee, but I think with Cunha, you do feel like, barring injury or anything, he does feel like it's all lined up. It gives United a ready-made player if they can get that one done, that would be snapped up by teams much, much higher up than United. You know, Newcastle, very much like Matheus Cunha, my colleague Craig Hope reported that Eddie Howe's number one target. Yeah. Now, Newcastle are likely to get into the top 5. Man United might join them in the Champions League next year, if all being well, they win the Europa League. But Newcastle, you'd say, a very attractive option as well. Big club, you know, would be able to go in there and play maybe ahead of someone like a Harvey Barnes. But United are confident, I think, that they can get this one done. Cunha wants to come to Manchester United, is keen on that move. I think he's had a couple of videos over the years where he's basically said as much, that he likes Man United and he'd love to play there. But you've got to get it done. And I think so far so good, but until everyone sees him with a scarf, or maybe not playing a piano, I think we've been scarred by that one in the past, but some elaborate video, then you'll believe it. Yeah. But it's a big step forward. I think overnight there was a big step forward taken, at least from his side, if not from the Wolves sort of side. That's great. I mean, I think you mentioned before about Wolves kind of being open and accepting this. They've given him a realistic buyout clause, haven't they? You see people get 200-300 million buyout clauses if they don't want to be sold, especially in La Liga, where you kind of have to have a buyout clause. But if it's 62 million, that's just enough to, we'll probably go for that. And this season, you know, in all competitions, 16 goals in 31 appearances, which over a goal every other game, or, you know, basically bang on a goal every other game. That's the marker for me, and it always used to be. I know goals have gone ballistic in the last sort of generation or so, but any attacker, if you're getting a goal every other game, that's a good standard, that's a good rate. And especially when United are playing 50, 60, 70 games a season, you're pushing 25 goals there if you can stick with that. So, I think he's a very good player. And that's not an out-and-out number 9 either, is he? He's someone that a lot of these goals are from the edge of the box, from outside the box, the penalty spot kind of area. He's not a tapping merchant by any means. So it's curious the number 10 position, because if you think that's probably where Xerxes likes to operate best. Kobbie Mainoo, it doesn't feel like Amarin likes him too much in the deeper role, doesn't maybe feel he's got the pace, so he's a 10 option. Mason Mount, you've kind of got quite a few, maybe not in the case of Mainoo, but Mount and Xerxes maybe as, what are they, starters, are they backups? Cunha would go in as a starting 10. I think that would be, and then you're working out where does Bruno play. I prefer Bruno in a deeper role, but if he's one of the 10s, you're already quite flooded with 10s then, and I think that's why the 9 is so important. That's not what Cunha is. If he can get you 15 goals, 16 goals as your number 10, imagine what your number 9 could get, and suddenly United look a completely different prospect then. Especially once you consider the fact that, I think it's absolutely mad that Bruno this season
he just gets numbers, doesn't he? He just does it. He don't care. Like, he's got more assists than Xerxes, Højlund and Garnacho have got goals. Or than Xerxes and Højlund have got goals.
Right.
So he's I don't know who he's assisting. Obviously it's centre-backs and it's wingers and central midfield. Like, he just puts the numbers out there. Imagine what it'd be like if he had a 50-goal-a-season striker up front. Or 50 is obviously ludicrous, but, a world-class
Lionel
striker.
Messi in his prime is coming to Man United.
But imagine Haaland was at Man United.
Right.
Like, how many assists Bruno would have, or how many... So
he's a phenomenal footballer.
Yeah,
he's a phenomenal footballer. Like I said, if he was in the right situation right now, it wouldn't be ridiculous to have Bruno in, Ballon. I mean, Rafinha's probably going to win the Ballon d'Or, who was struggling at Leeds. But Bruno Fernandes in the right, in a winning situation at a club that these awards love, he'd be right up there. So when there was that thing about him, I remember Bruno was giving a TV interview, and Ten Hag kind of pulled him away, and it was about his contract and what you're going to do. And part of the thing there was that Bruno wanted to know that they were going to put pieces around him. Yeah. They were going to build it out. Being captain of Man United is one of the biggest jobs in world football in terms of the scrutiny you face, and he always stands up to that. But just get him some better pieces. And I've been on before. I don't actually think this team is lacking good pieces. It's just lacking fundamental pieces. That. Back defensively, I like Yoro. I think he's improving.
Yeah, same.
I like Bruno. I think Maguire is very good and is very good on and off the pitch as well. De Ligt, I like.
Me too.
I think Dorgu, you've got to stick with. He's 20. He's still learning in the role. You've seen the youngsters come through. We'll talk about in a minute. Ugarte, I thought he played well on Sunday. Never lost the game. You'd then get a Cunha. You maybe get a striker.
Ahmad's come back as well.
Ahmad, as we say, maybe he's the right wing back. Dallow's at least improved of late in recent weeks. But imagine Ahmad and Dorgu in his full season, Cunha, a striker. It feels a bit different, doesn't it? It feels like that's a team that's got more of a chance in these games to actually put teams away. And imagine if he's still there, imagine a Garnacho off the bench, his pace and the durability of him, and a Xerxes in there, or a Mount, look. Some of those players I mentioned have underperformed, but you put better players ahead of them, they don't look too bad as a backup, and suddenly that squad looks a bit different. So I know I'm usually the resident sort of happy clapper, so to speak, that comes on and
I like that. It makes a difference.
You know what I mean? That's what I always get accused of. But I almost think being able to take a step back, you can see what they're looking at, foreshadowing it. Couple of moves and it feels different. I know in the sort of the season, be like, my God, Man United could finish 17th and not win the Europa League, and that is bad. Let's even me, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. That would be a bad season, but the future could be bright quickly, and that would start with, say, Cunha early on in the summer, I think.
And I think people either like to forget that, or we're too nervous to believe that, or we're too sad to believe that. But things can turn around quite quickly, and obviously Cunha by himself isn't going to win Man United a Premier League, and no one's suggesting that he will. But you look at,
of course not, yeah.
You get the right sort of player here and then. Obviously Salah's the example I always use. Like, this season he's got 32 goals for Liverpool. The next highest is Gakpo with 16, and then obviously Diaz with 15, which is very good. But it's not as though when they had Mane there getting 25 as well, and if you took Salah out of that team, they wouldn't win the league. I don't think they would. They obviously, and replaced him with an average winger. I don't think they would win the league this season. I think they would have struggled. I mean, I know they didn't win the Carabao in the final in the end anyway, but if you put in a top player into most teams, that can be another 15 points, and then you sort of have a team around them that's more confident. You build up and you sort of build into the tactics of a manager. All of a sudden, you can be challenging for Europe again. Other than we'll worry about anything else after that.
I look at Nottingham Forest, who were right at the bottom, and they made a big bet on that they would go sign 150, 200 players, 20 odd plus players in the end. But they really believed in that recruitment. And it didn't pay off the first season, but look at them now. They didn't go out and make tons of change the second time round. They believed that the pieces they got, Murillo, I think at most clubs in the Premier League, he's up there for young player of the season. I would have thought. Milenkovic has been brilliant. There are so many others. Ola Aina has been a gem of a signing, really, at fullback. And there are countless others that have done really well. If United are convinced that these are the players, like I said, a Cunha, a Delap, an Osimhen, a Dibling, whatever formula that ends up coming out as this summer, an Edison maybe at Atalanta midfield, whoever they decide are their guys, be decisive in the transfer window. Go get them early. Cunha's price is not going to change. That's why I sort of think he's one you could get done early. It's not one you need to drag out. Where's the negotiation? You know what the release clause is. The negotiation is how much are you going to pay up front.
They're not going to accept anything.
You're not going to accept anything less than that. So that's a move that if you believe he's our guy, he's our starting 10, which I believe that Vivell and Barada and Amarin and all those think that he can be, go and get him. There's no point waiting around because someone else will beat you to it. Yeah,
I completely agree. There was also some suggestion that tying it in with the end of the FFP financial year, trying to squeeze it in this season rather than next season, or however they do that, that will be a consideration as well, potentially getting him in early to lock it into this year's finances rather than next year.
Those are the kind of people that are far more clever than me. Those are people who are far better at numbers. But there is those kind of factors at play. And they are geniuses. The people who manage these accounts that are able to spin yarns that
it's mad, isn't
it? It's an art form. That's why clubs they never really cut the accounting department, because they are the ones that can dig them out of a hole if they need to.
You look at Chelsea in particular, how the living F they haven't had some fines or bans or any ramifications for spending $1.5 billion in 3 years.
That's what they sell. Maybe they sell the hotel to the team or the women's team.
Wasn't that decided that they weren't allowed to do that, or they weren't allowed to use? Like, how are they?
I know, but they are the kings of loopholes. They are the masters of the dark arts, really. And they usually do things that then gets the rule changed retrospectively. But look. I think the positive is that United aren't dithering on targets. I think that the fact that they know who they want, is the fan base know who they want, really. How can that not be a good thing, in my opinion?
From dithering to dibbling, let's go there. We saw James Sharp, your colleague, write about, it wasn't a particularly kind of saying United want him. It was an interesting article. So there's basically, it was Tyler Dibling talking about his mates taking the piss out of him for the potential 100 million fee that Southampton want. What's that all about?
James Sharp had been at Southampton game at West Ham, and Dibling was the one that got put up, and Dibling is quite quiet by all accounts, not one that usually speaks a lot, so for him to be the one that is the player that's put up, obviously the key question was, what have you made of all the Man United interest? Do you think you're worth 100 million quid? And he was saying how Aaron Ramsdale's been giving him plenty of stick. Every time he misses a shot in training, they're calling him Mr. 90 million, Mr. 80 million, Mr. 70 million. So if he keeps missing shots, maybe he'll be really, really affordable.
That'd be great.
If he just phones it in now between now and the end of the season. But he seemed quite relaxed about the interest. He said all the things you would want him to say as a Southampton fan, I guess. I want to do big things with the club. I guess starting with a relegation is not ideal, but I want to help the club. And he did not come out and said, put me on the first flight up to Manchester or get me into Old Trafford into the press room. But I think the fact he was quite relaxed about it shows that he's very much on the radar. He knows exactly about the interest. Jason Wilcock's still very keen on Tyler Dibling. I think quite interesting listening to Russell Martin talking about Tyler Dibling on a recent podcast. He was saying that technically, one of the best young players he's seen and has got the potential to be. And I know that is a buzzword that people hate when you say potential again. That United need the ready-made thing, but United also need players that will go up in value and appreciate in value. And while Cunha is a now guy, someone like a Dibling, you don't know how often these type of players come around. So let's see. I still think that is one to keep a very close eye on.
Obviously, United aren't paying anywhere near 100 million.
Absolutely not. No, I mean, no one is.
Is there a more realistic number that you've heard, or you could speculate on?
I think most clubs are looking at less than half of that, really. 40, 45, 50 max. I mean, I'm not even sure his own parents are paying 100 million for Tyler Dibling. As the bail money, I'm not sure.
Exactly. Let's move on to Delap then, Liam Delap, because again, he's part of this sort of trifecta of attackers that I keep seeing. Actually, you mentioned Semenyo yourself, so let's put it up to whatever the full version of a trifecta is. Semenyo, Osimhen, Delap, Cunha seem to be the names that we're seeing a lot. In terms of Delap and Osimhen, Is it the case that Delap is the you didn't win the Europa League and Osimhen is you did win the Europa League? Is it one is preferred over the other? Is there a chance we could get both of them and Cunha? What's the situation with those guys?
I don't think Delap is a kind of. I definitely don't think he's a contingency plan by any stretch. I think he is the number one target. I think that is a player that Jason Wilcox really wants, and I think that's been known for a while now. But just to underline the fact that I do think he is 1A, so to speak, the player that at 30 million again with that release clause, I know that got reported even less than the 40 million we initially suspected. That is a no-brainer for me.
He's going somewhere this summer, isn't he?
For sure. He will not be playing Championship football with Ipswich.
Can't imagine
that is not going to happen. Also factor in that he will be going away with England for the Under-21 European Championships. That works two ways. Either he goes, wins the Golden Boot in that tournament, maybe England win it, and then maybe Ipswich go, actually, we've got so many bidders that we'll end up getting way more. Or he goes away and he gets injured, and there's all these different permutations. But again, he's another that you sort of want to get through the door early. And again, if you know the release clause, what are you waiting around for? Make the pitch, make the case. Delap could come in, and I know there are a lot of sceptics out there. My TikTok comments will attest to that.
What are people sceptical about?
They're sceptical that this is a flash in the pan. It's exactly like Højlund. This is just another young player that's destined not to succeed.
Yeah,
I don't think Højlund at Atalanta and Delap at Ipswich are the same. I just don't think they are the same to compare. I think one was significantly less polished, and Delap is not the finished article by any stretch, but he's done really well in an Ipswich team which lacks chance creation and creativity. Now I'm saying you're pairing him with Cunha, Amass, Bruno Fernandes. That with respect to Amari Hutchinson and Sam Morsey and the others there, I mean that's night and day. Come on, that is a system which, and again, if you let's just say you start next season with a front three of Delap, Cunha and Xerxes, say, and you have Ahmed at right wing back. The onus would not just be on Delap. The onus right now is only on Højlund, really, and Bruno might play in a deeper role, and someone's got to come up with Maguire or Maine, or somebody's got to come up with Garnacho. Somebody's got to come up with a bit of magic in quite dull games, and Højlund, is really struggling. I think we've said that for months and months now, all season long. Delap, imagine Delap, imagine Cunha, imagine Xerxes around players that are able to let him do what he can do well. Because he's looked really good as a facilitator, but who's there to facilitate two? You'd have two players there in a front three that would look very different. I think Ahmad as well could be a very good attacking option. One of the frustrations, at least from friends of mine, is, God, why are we playing 5 defenders and 2 defensive midfielders against someone in 15th? I know United are down there.
We're also in 15th.
You know what I mean? But it's off 16th or 17th or 18th, whatever. It's like, this is so boring. And I think that's where an Ahmad and a Dorgu can balance each other out a little bit. Maybe, out of possession it's a 4 at the back, or in possession it's a 4 at the back, out of possession it's a 5, or whatever the case may be. But Delap, I think, a lot of scepticism around him, but not from me. I really think he is very talented, very physical, a lot more physical than he maybe appears when you see him. He's quite a quiet lad. He's Manchester-based previously with City, so he'd be comfortable in the area. It's not like he's got to settle. He knows the division, and he's getting better. Okay, Osimhen is just more accomplished as a footballer.
Yeah.
He's another.
Well, let's talk about Osimhen then, because obviously we know that there is interest in Delap, but I was just going to say, how many players can afford a 30 million Delap? Everyone in the Premier League.
Right.
Literally every single team in the Premier League, if they want him, can afford him.
For sure.
There is an almost unlimited amount of competition for him. Osimhen, on the other hand, was he 26 years old now? He's banging goals in again. He had a bit of a just bizarre season last season, on and off the pitch. I think mostly off the pitch it was very odd, some of the stuff that went on with him and Napoli.
Sure.
But he's back to that goal scoring, almost a goal a game kind of level, which he has been at in the past as well. You're looking at far fewer players could afford his potential wages, I think. And fee. You're looking more in the sort of 60 million maybe plus region, and what some of the reports I've seen on what he wants for wages are ludicrous. How does that work with United's sort of model of buying players? Could it be a Delap and Osimhen? How does that kind of look to you?
I mean, a Delap, Osimhen and Cunha, I think you lot would be getting very giddy. You lot would be getting very giddy.
I'd be really
so
giddy.
I'm going to temper that. I think Champions League is important to get Osimhen, I think. Just because of the money. The wages are huge.
Yeah.
What is the competing offers going to be? Because if United are the only one offering, say, 250, I don't know what the figures are. I mean, I spoke to somebody this morning who said that Osimhen's name is just not going away, is it? It's a name that is not disappearing. I do think there's a little bit of maybe push from his side. You're seeing a lot of reports. I get tagged and stuff all the time. Like, well, someone in Turkey said that it's all signed, sealed, delivered, ready to go. I think Osimhen is again keen. Why would Osimhen not want to get out of Napoli with respect to the Turkish league, go and play a European top 5 league?
Yeah. Man
United is an enormous football club that is massive. I'm sure he's grown up watching Man United and seeing them, being a power in the past at least. And like you say, I think fans would be a lot more excited about Osimhen. I think that's stating the obvious, but they represent two different things. Osimhen's probably a signing that United would have made a few years ago. Yeah. Big money, big wages. Doesn't feel like a risk, but you never know how these things go. Delap, a young player that his value can only go up, really. I mean, he's, in the way football finance is going, is a young English player going to be worth less than 30 million at a club the size of Man United? Probably not. So, yeah, if you're being greedy, you want Cunha as well, and you want Dibling, and you want a new goalkeeper, and you want others.
Probably another wing back if we're dreaming.
Yeah. So United need to sell. They need to sell to get. If you've still got Casemiro on the books, can you put another 300 grand a week player on there? I think the wages is the one little thing that sticks with me. That everything that I'm told is that United want to move away from that. If you move on from Rashford, you can eventually move on from a Casemiro. You move on from an Eriksen. These are some of the big earners. Move on from a Sancho, and you're going to come back in with a Dorgu, a Heaven, a Delap, that are not on comparable wages. No. That transforms.
Can you imagine Dorgu's probably on a quarter of what Casemiro's on, or thereabouts?
I would say so. Yeah. And that's without as I ever seeing the pay packet of Paddock Dorgu. But you can well imagine that it is significantly less. Yeah. It does feel like Ratcliffe and Ineos are eager to move away from that. But I also think they're eager to win. And if a player like Osimhen comes along and is ready to jump at the chance to join Man United, and United get back into the Champions League, and you're going to get X amount of money, do you go for both?
Yeah.
I don't know. It depends. It depends. I still think Delap is the one in the driving seat here. Yeah. I still think Delap and Cunha would be a brilliant start to the window, because they are two players that we see week in, week out can do it here. I'm not saying Osimhen can't before people come from it, but you know what you're going to get with those two, and you know that they're on wages. Cunha would be a high earner, don't get me wrong, but not in the same stratosphere, I don't think, as a Rashford, as a Sancho.
Yeah, and you look, and we say there's safe bets, and obviously players have moved from one Premier League club to another, and it hasn't worked. Sure. Obviously, Alexis Sanchez is a huge example of that at Man United. But then you look at this. I know he's at the Turkish league now, but Serie A, where Osimhen has been for the last 4 or 5 years, has a not great return. Strikers coming from there playing in the Premier League. Even people like Higuain, who, I know by the time he got to Chelsea was past his best a little bit, but was one of the safest bets of safe bets. He's getting 25 plus goals for season in, season out. I think he even had the record at one point for, when was it, Juventus, or first season at Juventus, 32 goals in a season. Goes to Chelsea, cannot score a goal. We saw, obviously Rasmus Højlund is suffering from that a little bit. I know he was a little bit better last season. But a lot of these players, and they'll even leave, look at Dzeko leaving leaving City, going to Serie A. I think was one of the top scorers in the league. I can't remember his name. What's the name? He just played for Chelsea. The French striker, Giroud. Same
there
sort of thing.
There are so many factors at play. Yeah. Like, I was convinced that Di Maria was there was just no way that could fail.
Yeah, I agree.
He's one of my favourite players that kind of my time growing up watching football that I've seen. When he went on to PSG and did really well, and in Portugal before that, I couldn't believe that would be allowed and be able to fail. But again, off the pitch, the burglary and all the stuff that affects. So yeah, nothing is a surefire bet. You've seen McTominay go and be one of Serie A's best players this season. I still think that was a bit disappointing. I think United fans are disappointed with that one.
Yeah.
But Lukaku we've seen go and do well and then come back and not do well and go again, and it's you never know. But as well, look at the team that they're coming into. United. There's so many times I've watched United this season where they don't create that much. And I know against Wolves you could pin blame on Højlund for the chances there, not putting it to Mainu at the back post and the one where Garnacho flashed it across. They were legitimate chances, but I've watched plenty of games where there isn't. You could plug an Osimhen in, a Cunha, whatever. They're not creating stuff.
No.
So the context of the team is not great, which is what Amorim talks about all the time. In terms of chucking in the youngsters, it doesn't feel a great environment to put these players in. But you do feel like just I sound like football Twitter here when I say the aura of Osimhen, but he would bring a level of confidence from the fans. You know what I mean?
People have passed to him more. Our wingers and players would pass to him more than they pass to Højlund. I honestly think that. We speak about this all the time, but when Ronaldo was here, he was well out of form, couldn't finish anything. Looked slow, and he didn't have a very good pre-season for loads of different reasons, but people still pass to him constantly, too much almost.
Yeah.
Whereas Højlund now, it's so easy to cut inside and Højlund's there, but I'll have a crack at the back post instead because why not? If Osimhen comes in, people will be gleefully passing the ball to him in the box because it's Victor Osimhen in the middle. So those things kind of play into it, like the auras, as people say. Yeah. That actually is a real thing. If you want to pass them the ball more and you give them the ball in better situations, that helps players score more goals. You mentioned about sales and people leaving. I'm just going to read you, again, this is from spotrack.com. I'm sure it's not 100% accurate, but we can get a rough idea of who are the big earners at Man United without going into the specifics of 350 this, 200 that. So of these kind of top 7, 8, 9 players, who do you think is a likely departure this summer? So we've got Casemiro, probably on the biggest wages at the club.
Yeah.
Do you think he could go?
I think he would like to stay.
Okay.
I think United would be... look, he's played well recently. It's Renaissance.
Yeah.
But I still think United, if they could get some money for Casemiro on an expiring contract, I think that'd be... Yeah. But I actually do think he may still be sticking around into next season.
Bruno Fernandes unquestionably staying.
Absolutely not. Yeah, he's staying.
Yeah, great. And again, Bruno Fernandes, no one ever mentions his salary. I've never heard anyone say, listen, he's on 300 grand a week. Yeah. People don't even know he's on 300 grand a week because he's that good. I love that. Yeah, everyone else, it's like, Rashford's salary all the time. Sancho, Casemiro, all of them. No one mentions Bruno's. Mason Mount is an interesting one because we're 2 seasons into this now. He's one of the bigger earners at the club. What do you think is going to happen with him this summer?
I mean, Ruben Amorim really likes him. So he thinks that, look, this is a system that Mount played under Thomas Tuchel and can succeed in. I think there's been an element of misfortune in terms of he's been unlucky with injury, but how often can you get away with saying that when they're just injury prone? Yeah. There's a difference between being unlucky and being injury prone. I think you give him one more. He's got one more season, hasn't he? He's got one more season.
Do you think he will get one more season?
I think he will. I think they'll say to him, look, get a full pre-season under your belt and you need to be a difference maker next season. Yeah. Otherwise you will need to be cut loose.
Because too often I see him come on for 25 minutes and
I know.
Don't really see him do a lot. It's almost like he doesn't get the ball very often. I don't know why that would be, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you almost need to wipe the slate clean with him in the summer and just go, right, let's just, this is my full pre-season with you, full season, we'll go into it. You can be a difference maker. If Amorim believes that, I think you've got to trust in him that Mount is not going to go anywhere, I don't think.
Okay. Delap not going anywhere, presumably.
Nope.
Harry Maguire, the same?
Again, he's got 1 year left on his contract. He won't be going anywhere. Okay. They'll be keeping him around. He's too valuable on and off the pitch.
I think he could sign another deal.
I don't know if there'll be a rush. You just wait and see how it plays out. Yeah. United are always needing to develop and is that next great young centre-back out there that would replace Maguire. But for now, he's not going anywhere.
Okay. Christian Eriksen, almost certainly leaving.
He will go,
Yeah. This is the most interesting one because after this it's Mazraoui, no. Ahmad, no. We know Victor Lindelof's probably going to go.
Lindelof will go, yeah.
Luke Shaw's an interesting one because how long's he got left on his deal? I think his deal ends, is it next season?
I feel like he might have another year.
1 year?
Yeah.
But not started a game all season. Like, he's you mentioned injury prone. I think we can clearly say that about him at this stage.
Definitely.
What's going to happen with him?
I mean, look, he's been at the club for so long that it's not about, a lot of these things are we need to get at least 30 million, you need to get for PSR, but that's none of that.
He's paid off and then some now.
He's paid off and then some. He's probably due his testimonial at this point.
Yeah, what is it, 1 more year he's been here?
Yeah. So he's been here so long that something tells me he might not get a testimonial. I don't know. But he's one that I don't know what you do with, really. Look at Harry Amass has come in and shown you a lot more. I don't think Luke Shaw has the ability now to play as a left wing back.
No.
I don't think he has the legs. I put a video up on my TikTok of him in training, in open training ahead of the Lyon game, and you could just see the scar on his leg from that nasty injury in the Van Gaal era, wasn't it, when he broke his leg, and you still see the effects of that injury there. And I think just seeing his leg up close, it was like it showed me just how devastating it was, really. I don't know whether he is somebody that who is going to buy Luke Shaw. Is he not just someone that you just ride it out with behind the scenes? Is he useful to people? I mean, he seems, from what I gather, to be beneficial to the youngsters in helping them.
He'll be 30 in the summer, so he's not old, but he's not young anymore.
Yeah, I just think that there's not a huge market, I don't think, for Luke Shaw. I mean, if United could get money for Luke Shaw, I'm almost certain they would do it, but I would be surprised.
Okay, well let's move on a little bit then. You mentioned Harry Amass before, making his full debut. It's weird because he's one of those players that you think like he must have played a few times before, because he was mentioned so heavily last pre-season, wasn't it? And played a few games there, and you think, oh yeah, he's probably played 4 or 5 games. That was his full debut. He started that game, and I thought looked very good in that game. How did that go down? And we were talking a little bit beforehand about what went into him starting that game.
Yes, obviously makes his debut on his birthday at Leicester off the bench, and that's a monumental moment. I think there was real disappointment in people close to him that he didn't play in that Community Shield. That all the signs pointed to. I mean, I wrote that he was going to, and everyone else did. It looked nailed on that he was going to play. Didn't even make the squad that day.
Weird,
wasn't even on the match day programme, so there was nothing. Whole family had gone. There was nothing there to save it, and that was a real setback for him mentally, because you think, right, I've been around it for so long, had a great tour. Ten Hag had question marks over his physicality. He is on the smaller side, as if I'm on the bigger side here, but he is on the smaller side, and I think there was question marks. Ten Hag said he needs 3 months to really build up that physicality. But you see now, and I wrote a kind of a long piece on how he's gone from that disappointment into the first team, and the work he's done in the gym. A source was telling me, it's unbelievable. In terms of that, you saw it against Wolves. There was that moment where he pulled that slide tackle off in the corner and was able to just shoulder barge.
He looks a bit like Luke Shaw.
Yeah, and he's. But one of the focuses is keeping him lean. You don't want him to be too
bulky.
Chunky. Look at Shirky the other day. Everyone was saying he's way too big to. You don't want to be too stocky, because you want to get up and down. And I thought he showed a real fearlessness against Wolves in his driving forward and his crossing. He wasn't afraid to settle into the game and put his crosses in. In that piece I wrote, there was a lot in there about how he'd been doing a lot of extra work with Dalot and Maguire. Maguire had pulled him for a chat and said, basically the lads think you're ready to start.
That's great.
And I know people think, well, they're bound to be welcoming and they are, these senior players, but it was put to me that there's a difference between them, welcoming these youngsters in and sort of really accepting them as just a regular squad member. Because they're seeing youngsters come and go in the sessions, and it feels like Amass has really been accepted now as you just are one of the players. And when he got told about that in the meeting, there was no song or dance made about he's starting against Newcastle. It is Harry's at left wing back, and I think that was a sign to everyone that he's here to stay, really. And who knows, in next season, is it Diego Leon's going to come in? Is he a lone target? Is Amass, do you give him a year at a Premier League side to bed and then come back, and see how things go?
He's only just turned 18, hasn't he? So
very, very young.
Really young.
Very young. And I think you can almost get a bit swept up with, wow, these are really great performances, but you want Harry Amass to play for Man United for years and years to come. And he doesn't need to do all that at once. So really, really bright. And I think for him, to finally get that breakthrough was important, because he's had to wait so patiently for it after missing out in the Shield.
Yeah, it was great to see that. And I mentioned then about Luke Shaw. And there is And I don't know if it's the way, it's like a chest first sort of running style that they both have, but he has got some of that silky good touch, and the crossing was really nice. Like, not to use United players as examples of what not to do, but at times you see Dallow's crossing and it's so inconsistent, and he looks like every time he hits it he's not quite sure, can I hit the penalty spot? You watch him crossing it, and every time he's got a kind of culture to that left foot that looks like you could see him picking out a Delap or an Osimhen time and time again with those crosses. He's got a real sort of quality to him, which you don't see everything all at once in pre-season, but some of those crosses, I thought he's striking the ball really nicely there. Smooth, reliable technique. He looks like a good player to me.
Yeah, technically he's very, very sound. I think the question mark is physicality. How would he be able to handle the great wingers of the Premier League? Jacob Murphy, I don't think gave him a torrid time, but was a tough assignment on your first start.
Especially the 4 Murphys in at the minute.
Yeah, you are going to come up against a Salah, a Saka. If you are the guy in that position for Man United, it's a tough place to be, and you need to go both ways. Systems with a back three rely on the wing backs to provide great width, and I know there is plenty of frustration when Garnacho maybe doesn't give the ball to Dorgu, or I've seen all of that. But Amass, I think at least he did look like he belonged there, and he's not a shy guy. No. He's confident in his ability, but he could have gone on loan in January. That was very much on the table. And he just felt that I can break into the team. If I stay, I can break in. And I thought that decision's been vindicated now.
Yeah, I hope he can get more appearances, and we'll see how Leon and Dorgu and all that affects his chances. But if you keep playing like that, he's definitely going to get more minutes. Tyler Fredricson has had a different path, because he kind of came out of nowhere a little bit. He started that game and was it 60 passes or something, looked great on the ball, pushed up well, some good moments as well, stepping up, winning the ball back. He's not really been in the picture for a long time.
No.
And then all of a sudden he's starting ahead of players like Kokonki, who seems to have been a mainstay of the bench. Yeah. Now you've got Fredricson starting. Again, how did that come about, and what's the thoughts on him? Is he a potential, or was he like give him a minute and then we'll see?
No, I think internally in the academy, Kokonki does seem the better prospect. 17, good size. Amarin, there was a reason Amarin sort of took to him right away. I think from like the very first training session. Fredricson, it's just been a career that's been laced with setbacks. He made the bench under Ten Hag in a game against Sociedad in the Europa League. He was 17, 18 at the time there. He trained when Ronaldo was at the club. He was training with the first team then, and wasn't massively on the radar. I think a little bit in and out. Then helped guide United, was instrumental in getting them to the FA Youth Cup final, and then missed the final through illness. You can imagine how disappointing that was. As the story went, Louis Jackson was taken out of his history lesson at school when he found out that Fredricson couldn't play, and Jackson played really well, and they won. But for Fredricson, imagine you get all the way there and you don't have to play the final because you're ill and you're really unwell. And then you think you have a 16-month layoff, injuries really sort of troubled him. The under-21s, he's had good games and bad games. The good games I've seen him, he's always looked very, very composed on the ball. Again, physically against bigger players, is he really ready for it? And I think you just saw it. There was one moment where Strand Larsen got the wrong side of him, or the right side of him in Strand Larsen's case, and he recovered really well. And I think that there were so many positive moments. Him and Amass were my sort of 2 standout players for United, because you all go to Old Trafford, and when I go down to pitch level, when I'm walking towards the mix zone, it dawns on me just how big that place is. Sometimes when you sit higher up, you're like, oh yeah, it's a massive stadium, but when you're like a tiny little Sabutio figure on the pitch, it's enormous. And I could only imagine, making your debut and being number 254 and playing in a game where you're coming up with respect against Cunha and Strand Larsen. Wolves had won 5 in a row, but he didn't put a foot wrong, really. No. But I would look at someone like a Fredricson and say, what I would love to see next season is for him to be on loan at a Premier League club, not a League 2 loan or a League 1 loan. Put him in at maybe one of the newly promoted sides, say, because you're going to do a lot of defending there. Get him game time if you can, or put him in a place where you can get regular game time, and he will develop so much. Because then, look, if he makes it at Man United, wow, great, Carrington will be chuffed. If not, he might be worth 10 million, 12 million in a year's time.
We saw with Willy Kambwala.
Exactly.
He played a handful of games, and then, what was it, 10 million we got for him. Obviously, the dream is that he plays, but not every we've got this incredible academy at the moment, winning games left, right and centre. I know they're not out of the Youth Cup again, but in terms of the amount of games they've won over the last 24 months or so is astonishing. Not all of them will go on to be first team regulars for Man United, but hopefully at least we can supplement what is available.
United need to get better at selling those that are surplus to requirements as well. And I'm not saying we don't know what's going to happen with Fredricson. Really good. Aidan Heaven's another that we were waxing lyrical about, and he would probably still be playing now if he wasn't injured, right? And Fredricson may not have got his opportunity because Heaven would have played, and obviously he had that small setback, so that's changed things. Martinez is out. United have got a lot of centre backs that are good. It's just the fact that those in front of them can't put the ball in the net. And so inevitably, you're just inviting pressure on, and they're going to crack eventually. I think Delict's done well. Mazraoui has done well, by and large. A couple of mistakes. Maguire has done really well. Yoro, I think, has improved massively. Martinez people like, and again, you're looking at it now saying, was Martinez going to go straight back into the strongest team? Which you wouldn't have thought maybe a year or two ago. Evans will move on, Lindelof will move on, but then you think, well, we just can promote from within, could save ourselves millions.
Well, Aidan Heaven looked excellent in the few games that he played.
Aidan Heaven, brilliant, and he cost $1 million and a half. And people were talking about Branthwaite. I know United really like him, but why would you go and spend so much on him when you've got all these great young players that you can supplement and you focus on the priority, which is that attack? So, I think another great week for Carrington, and to finish the game, you had Cheeto on the pitch, Amass was there. I can only imagine Nick Cox and some of the other academy staff were just beaming with pride at just seeing that, because it is so much hard work to get to that point. Yeah,
massively. I mean, and also obviously I know we lost the game and we don't want to sit here loving losing too much, but that defence and the defending limited Wolves to one shot inside the 18-yard box. I know the goal came from outside the 18-yard box. When you think of, if you can limit every team you play to one shot inside your 18-yard box, you'd probably win the league, let alone be 17th. So it's good signs in terms of how
two things can be true, Joe. That Man United losing all the time is bad. And youngsters playing well is good. Exactly. And two things can be true. You know what I mean? They were the best players in the Man United shirt. That is a huge success.
Yes.
On a day which was not a success by any stretch of the imagination. So they are allowed to both be accurate. I watched you the other day saying that you were a bit conflicted of you could end up in the Champions League and you win the Europa, and then it's a good season, but you don't want to finish 17th. I can understand that, but maybe it's just me. Maybe the happy clapper in me.
No, I like it.
The green shoots of life. Look at the positives. You know what I mean?
Toxic positivity is what I get
really
with. Wow. You're here even outshining
I just waltz in every now and again, but the green shoots of life. You know, if in 6 months' time you've got Cunha, Delap, Amass is playing regularly or is at a really good loan destination. You've managed to move on from Anthony, from Rashford, from Sancho. These 300 grand a week earners have gone. Bruno's surrounded by better players. Xerxes fit again. Ahmad's in there. I mean, I hope for all your sake you're a lot happier than you have been this season.
Me too.
Only so many of these videos.
And we might be in the Champions League with all those players.
You never know.
Right. This is great to have you on. Thank you very much, Nathan. Thanks for coming in, making me feel a lot better.
You're smiling. So whenever you're frowning again, they'll give me the call and say, Joe's not happy again.
Right, we need you to come in and fix Joe up. No, thank you very much, Nathan. Thank you for joining us at home as well. We've got the link to all of Nathan's socials and his recent articles in the description as well. So make sure you go and check him out, follow him, send him love as well. Thank you for coming on, mate. It was brilliant as always. Thank you very much. Hit subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll see you in a bit.